Now, Game Week 6 might have only just started, but I think it's important to prep ahead. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my top transfer targets ahead of FPL Game Week 7. Now, of course, before we dive into today's video, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as we're now trying to hit 20k. We hit 19k on the deadline stream, so thank you very much for your continued support on the channel. Like I said, we're on that road to 20k. And honestly, it would be absolutely amazing if we could hit it. Let's start off first, as we always do with our who to buy videos, taking a look at the 11FI data for the next 5 game weeks. Of course, if you want to go and check this out, there will be a link in the description to the amazing website. First up, let's take a look at some projected goal numbers over the next few weeks. Game week 7 and beyond, Manchester City's numbers do look pretty good. There is a little bit of a dip off in game week 11. However, I do believe for the next few weeks, investing in Erling Haaland is probably going to be the play. He is going to be the premium we want. We can see some decent numbers for Liverpool in game week 8 and game week 10. However, I just don't think Liverpool, attacking wise, or Salah are quite at the right flow for me right now in terms of FPL. I think the other assets, there's too much rotation, and with European football coming up, it isn't going to be worth kind of, investing into a potential headache. And I think right now, Salah just isn't hitting the heights you need him to be hitting to justify his, of course, 14.5 million price tag. And I think Haaland, on the other hand, is absolutely smashing it out of the park and definitely a player worth investing in. We're also seeing a little bit of a drop-off in terms of Chelsea's numbers for the next 2. However, there is a return in game week 9. So I do think that's potentially, a period where maybe we could go without the likes of João Pedro for the next few weeks. And, of course, maybe look for a return in game week 9. So maybe some short-term punts, or maybe a switch to Arsenal this week with, of course, their great projected goals up against West Ham could potentially be the play for this one. Like I said, Arsenal do have those great numbers coming up, but of course with a new manager bounce, we might potentially see a comeback. And obviously Nuno is famed for being quite a good defensive coach, so I don't mind that. If people are a little bit hesitant on potentially taking a gamble on, say, a Gyökeres or a Saka for that fixture. Spurs, their numbers look pretty decent over the next few as well. I am recording this while Spurs are currently playing. I would just err on the side of caution though. If Spurs do go big and the likes of Kudus, Xavi Simons and Richarlison do look good, and obviously Mega Hall, my big concern would be that they do play Bodo Glimt and then at the early kickoff against Leeds on Saturday. So that's quite a difficult turnaround. If you've ever tried to look at how to get to Bodo Glimt, which I have, it is very difficult. It requires 2 flights to get there. It's basically like in the Antarctic at this point. It's cold. They're going to be playing on a plastic pitch. Then they've got the early kickoff Saturday. So there might be some rotation to maybe something to monitor there. But definitely still a fixture worth targeting in my opinion. Like I said, those Spurs assets, if they do good tonight, could also be definitely worth a kind of investable case as well. I think Newcastle as well, obviously we'll have to see how they get on against Arsenal. If they do obviously look a bit better going forward. Recently they've not been great, but yeah, it's kind of one of those. Villa probably have their final good fixture, so if you have kept Watkins throughout this pain, maybe it's going to be worth it against Burnley. You might finally get a return. After this, though, it is probably going to be worth selling. Forest as well. This is going to be the end for their assets and definitely would be looking to get rid in my personal opinion. Let's take a look then at the defensive clean sheet numbers. Again, coming from 11FI, again, the link is in the description. We're seeing Arsenal just absolutely look incredible on this metric as well. Of course, if you've looked at any of the betting data as well over the next few weeks, Arsenal's numbers do just look terrific. So I think an investment into that defence is going to be worthwhile, of course, if you haven't already wildcarded. So Gabriel, Raya, maybe one of the fullbacks, but again, the minutes could be a little bit dicey over the next few weeks as well. Again, we are seeing a drop-off for Chelsea over the next few weeks, and I think a lot of people might, of course, be looking to potentially get out of their Chelsea defenders. They've got a lot of injuries and of course suspensions to Trevor Chalobah now, so probably a team I would be maybe a little bit cautious around. I think Newcastle, as you can see here, definitely have some defenders I will be looking to target. Maybe Nick Pope, for example, if you're looking for a Sanchez replacement, or of course potentially maybe like a Dan Burn who's been pretty steady with those defensive contributions. We are seeing a drop off from Liverpool, so I think obviously moving away from Virgil van Dijk and investing into, say, a Gabriel or a Saliba is probably the sensible move right now as well. Again, we're seeing a drop off for Nottingham Forest over the next few weeks. They've had their good fixtures. It is of course time to get out of the likes of Murillo, Milenkovic and Williams again, in my personal opinion. I think obviously some teams that could potentially surprise us over the next few weeks. I think Palace have just been absolutely smashing it out of the park. Richards, Lacroix, all could still be very decent pickups, all have the potential as well to go and pick up some defensive contributions. I think Sunderland's numbers will probably get a boost over the next few weeks from the 11-5 model. They've looked so much better than what has been predicted early doors. If you are thinking about potentially a game week 8 bench boost with them, they've got a 26% probability. Of course, Burnley and Leeds facing off against each other as well. Could be maybe another week you want to look at as well. Also, Sunderland in game week 10 have a 28% probability. So if you are looking for some of their defensive cheap assets at 4 million, they're doing very well, picking up very decent points in the defensive contributions and looking for them on a bench boost. Game week 8 or game week 10 is going to be probably the week you want to play it. Like I said, that was the 11-5 data. Now let's go and dive into some player picks. Okay, so of course there is only one place to start off talking about. It is going to be Erling Haaland. Like I said, he does feel like the premium asset we all want to own within the game right now. 8 goals to start the season, 62 points as you can see here. Left it late against Burnley, but definitely delivered the goods. We saw with the 11-5 numbers, the next few weeks for me, he does personally feel like the asset, the premium asset that a lot of us are wanting to own. I think Brentford and Everton, great fixtures, and Villa as well, the way that they've started the fixtures this season, are very, really good fixtures, especially for Erling Haaland, like I said, who is just accumulating plenty of expected goals, as you can see here, delivering the goods on a very consistent basis, and still playing full 90 minutes despite, having a back injury all week. Says that the minutes are good for me. I know they've got some European football coming up, but he just feels like the premium asset to invest in. And I think with Bruno missing that penalty, confidence is probably going to be low on him as a potential captaincy option against Sunderland. And of course, Sunderland looking quite resilient at the moment as well, and United just not really at the races, unless probably Almiron gets sacked. I don't think I'm probably going to be looking at Bruno captain. I'm probably going to stick my armband on Erling Haaland. I imagine that's going to be the same for a lot of people as well. And I think, again, after another disappointing result for Mohamed Salah in terms of points, a lot more people are going to be looking to shift their premium or their funds to Erling Haaland, who, like I said, at the start of this season has just been absolutely on fire. I do think the fixtures probably get a little bit more difficult around game week 10, and there might be a conversation that might be the period to potentially sell him. However, it does depend what form he is in, because he could very easily score against Bournemouth, Liverpool and Newcastle as well. I don't think Liverpool have been very great defensively. Bournemouth shipping 2 against Leeds as well. Newcastle are probably the team that do frighten me. However, when we get to game week 12, we are going to be in the midst of midweek football every kind of, other day. So like it's gonna kind of, build up, and I don't think Newcastle are going to continue to play this kind of negative defensive football. But obviously we'll have to wait and see when we get to that period. But I still think Erling Haaland, yes, you've missed probably his best fixture out of the next lot, but he's still very much an investable asset in my personal opinion. Let's move on to another man who absolutely smashed it out of the park today. It is going to be Thiago from Brentford. I think I saw a few people had actually sold him for Erling Haaland. Thankfully, it has, of course, worked out. But I think if you are looking for a budget enabler, maybe you're trying to come away from potentially somebody like a João Pedro over the next few weeks, or, of course, looking to downgrade and just have a bench forward that is going to play if you need him, or maybe on a wild card and looking at a bench boost in game week 8, then I think Thiago could be that man, and he could be our cheap forward that a lot of us might be looking at when we, of course, do start to potentially move away from already playing our bench boosters and looking just kind of, for a cheap rotation forward. I think Thiago is going to be that guy. He took both his goals great today, to be honest. Just absolute natural striker. I think with Sharda already missing a penalty as well, probably makes him the penalty taker for this side. Now, I don't think the fixtures, like I said, are going to be ideal for investment, and probably not somebody I would maybe waste a transfer on this week, with, of course, City and then Liverpool in game week 9. However, the game week 8 fixture is decent, but again, new manager bounce for West Ham potentially could impact that one. However, I think Brentford, regardless, unless they're probably playing the bottom 3, aren't really going to have a strong fixture this season, so it's always going to be difficult finding when to play him. However, with a player that is playing very good minutes, is on penalties, at 6 million, you don't mind it if he does potentially haul off the bench, but those weeks where you need him, he could be potentially a little bit of a steady Eddie. However, I don't think it is going to be the ideal hop-on point for managers that are potentially looking to invest into him this game week. Let's move on then to the next player. And it is going to be a man that I'm really gassed that I kind of called it early doors this season. It's going to be Granit Xhaka. Now, I haven't got him in my team, but I have put him into my girlfriend's team, and he's been absolutely delivering the goods for her on a very consistent basis. So I know what points this man has been picking up. As you can see, 29 points for a 5 million asset. Very, very good. He came away with hitting defensive contributions today. He's also got multiple avenues to points, which is always something that we want to be looking for with our players. So he's got those defensive contributions. He's already picked up 6 points from that alone this season. It's kind of like every other game at the moment. The Granit Xhaka is hitting those numbers. He's also taken some free kicks and set pieces. That's where, of course, one of his assists came from today. So again, like I said, you've got a player that can, of course, do that. There's slight open play share, but as you can see, not really too much. It is going to be more the points you're going to expect from him. Again, all going to be from defensive contributions and probably any set play kind of assists. Up next is Manchester United, one of the worst sides at defending them. Brentford were very unfortunate for me not to have came away from a goal from a corner or a free kick in today's game. Vandenberg and Collins both had great opportunities. So if you're looking at this, you're probably thinking, right, load into whoever takes, you know, the set pieces for Sunderland, because if Almiron's still the manager, then that could be a great fixture. Game week 8 against Wolves, an absolutely massive fixture for Sunderland's survival. You feel if they win that, and given the strong start that they've obviously had to this season, they definitely could put themselves in kind of, you know, contention for potentially staying in the Premier League with next season. And obviously a lot of people are maybe looking at a bench boost in game week 8 with, of course, Leeds taking on Burnley as well. So another fantastic fixture that you potentially could have. So if you're on a wild card this week or looking for a cheap midfielder, I honestly think my go-to pick right now would be Granit Xhaka. Next up is going to be Ismail Assar. Remember him? Yes, the troll from a few game weeks ago, of course. People brought him in ahead of the good runs for Crystal Palace. He then got himself injured, but he is back on the scene, grabbing a goal against Liverpool. He absolutely loves that. Who remembers that that Watford game? I think it was Liverpool looking maybe like an unbeaten season. Watford absolutely destroyed him, and Sarr was a big part of that. Loves scoring against Liverpool. I don't know if he's going to be the right ideal replacement for me. I think maybe game week 10 could be the period where maybe we look at him as a potential option. I think game week 8 and game week 9 don't feel like the best fixtures. Everton away as well, they've actually been quite good at their new stadium. I think Everton as a whole as well have been quite impressed with so far early doors this season. Obviously European football as well is starting up for Crystal Palace, and this goes for all of their assets if you've been impressed with them. There is going to be some rotation coming down the line. There are going to be players getting early substitutions, whether that be in the Premier League or, of course, in the Europa League. There's also potentially more chance for injuries as well. So if you are thinking about bringing in Sarr or any player that does play in European football this midweek, do be, of course, cautious with your early transfers. Don't make them unless you absolutely have to, in my personal opinion. Like I said, there's always injuries that can happen in the Champions League game or suspensions or anything like that. So do just bear that in mind when making transfers or potentially early transfers this game week. I think game week 10 is probably going to be the right point. I think if you've maybe got yourself like a Kudus, a Xavi Simons and an Ndai, their fixtures roughly turn around game week 10 anyway, and I think that is probably maybe the ideal hop-on point for Sarr. We'll have a bit more understanding of how the Crystal Palace rotation is going to work around Europe as well, and how he is kind of managing his overall fitness as well. Played around 74 minutes today, so decent numbers coming off the back of an injury, so it looks like they've given plenty of time to, of course, rest and recover and haven't rushed him back. So it is going to be one of them. But like I said, with European football coming up, there might be some more early substitutions. But he is honestly one of those assets that does feel very, very explosive and has potential talismanic abilities at 6.4 million for me. He does feel like it's either going to be probably him, Mateta, or Munoz who would be scoring for Crystal Palace right now. And like I said, around game week 10 does feel probably the better investment period for me, rather than, of course, looking at him as a game week 7 replacement, but someone that I'm going to keep a very, very firm eye on over the next few weeks. Let's head over to them Bournemouth, and I mean, what a start to the season they've had, and what a start two assets in particular have had from this club. Let's start off first with Senesi. This guy just feels honestly like one of the best defensive picks you could have in the game right now. Honestly, he's absolutely smashing it out of the park. His defensive contribution numbers, he's been hitting them every single week. The only player right now until Tarkowski plays with a 100% success rate for all the games that he's played. He's got himself an assist again today, also hitting defensive contributions in a 2-2 game, coming away with a 7-pointer, also hitting bonus. If you look to last week as well, the guy managed to pick up one bonus, clean sheet and DEFCON, and was very unfortunate not to have came away with free bonus. I think just with Bournemouth being a great defence, Senesi having that ability to, of course, hit defensive contributions, he just feels like a really easy selection, especially within the defence. And I think this is why a lot of managers on Wildcard this week went with him, because like I said, he, even when he's not getting those clean sheets, is still finding alternative routes to points, and those defensive contributions, like I said, if he continues just to pick them up every single game, he is probably going to be one of the highest scoring defenders within the game. Now, the fixtures do, of course, get a little bit more difficult. I think City and Palace in 8 aren't ideal. However, it is Bournemouth. They've got no European football to worry about. They've been a great defence for XG conceded so far this season. Senesi, like I said, is absolutely smashing it out of the park with, of course, his numbers that he's picking up. So I still think they're going to be a decent side to invest in, and I think Senesi as well would be one of my top contenders if I'm in the market for a centre-back this week. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about Anton Semenyo. I'm so glad I brought this guy in weeks ago. I mean, he's become very, very popular, as you can see, 51.6. He's absolutely smashed out the start of this season, just absolutely killing it across the board. As you can see, all greys for the next few weeks. But like I said, he just feels like one of those players, again, that has multiple avenues to points. And I think that is one of the big things that we are going to be maybe looking at. Difficult fixture, like I said, in 10, and maybe we've just seen Saw as a potential replacement. But if you maybe can just get away with 10, 11 and 12 feel perfectly acceptable as well to keep him in for, and definitely, like I said, a good, decent long-term asset. People are probably going to ask me, have I maybe missed the Semenyo boat? I think it's probably setting off without you, but there's still that opportunity to probably get yourself on board with it, because like I said, he's got multiple avenues to points. We saw it last week, a 5-pointer hitting those defensive contributions and getting the clean sheet with, of course, Bournemouth's great XG conceded defence. He also, when Cliver isn't on the field, we think is going to be the penalty taker. We're yet to see what happens when him and Cliver are on there. Scored from a free kick today again, so has some set piece share, has definitely open play goal share, as we've already seen as well this season. So like I said, it's just these players that have got multiple avenues to points, and right now he feels like the best Bournemouth asset to go for. And one of the main reasons that I like Bournemouth players is they've got, like I said, no European football. They're out of the Carabao Cup, so there's not really anything other than the Premier League that they've got to focus on, or Semenyo has to focus on. So realistically, he is just going to be a great pick regardless of probably the fixtures coming up. He still feels like he's got opportunities and avenues, like I said, to multiple points routes. So I think selecting him is always going to be a wise play in my personal opinion. Okay, and the final slide of today's video is going to be talking about the Arsenal players and whether or not I would invest in them, for one, and number two, who would be my top assets to, of course, go for. Now, I am filming this on the Saturday night. Arsenal are yet to play, but I think it is a good scouting barometer to look at the Newcastle game and see who you would like for the next few fixtures coming up, because they're definitely investable fixtures, as we saw with the 11-5 data. Big peaks in terms of projected goals and, of course, clean sheets as well over the next few weeks. Let's start off then first with the clean sheets. So we're going to talk about Gabriel and Raya because they're my two favourites to invest in. Gabriel, for me, just feels like a guy who is going to be a very solid pick regardless. Like I said, those clean sheet numbers look absolutely phenomenal. I think he's, again, one of the first names on the Arsenal team sheet, and I think what we might see as well with Saka being back is better deliveries than what Madueke and Rice were offering from set pieces, and we might see this guy pop up. Like, I know Arsenal have already been quite prolific from their set pieces so far this season, but one man that was absolutely smashing it out of the park last season and hasn't really got himself involved yet is going to be Gabriel. So I'm liking the look of him. I think he could be a great little pickup, to be honest. The concern I do have is, of course, defensive contributions. Like, as you can see here, 2 points so far this season from defensive contributions. It's just not good enough when, of course, you've got people like we've already spoke about, Senesi, 100% success rate, Tarkowski yet to play in game week 6, but already, again, another player that has 100% success rate. The Sunderland defenders absolutely smashing it out the parks with goals, clean sheets, and again, defensive contributions. You do ask yourself, is it worth paying that 6.1 million? Now, I think for any other team other than Arsenal, probably not. We've seen Van Dijk's numbers massively tail off a cliff. I think like the picks of like Gvardiol and stuff like that aren't going to be worth it. But What we are seeing from Arsenal, like I said, is those heavy projected goals, and they've only conceded one big chance so far this season. So I think this defence is built a little bit different, and we've seen that the past few years from Arteta. That is why the projected goals are so good over the next few weeks for Arsenal, and that does continue for a long period of time as well if you look at the betting data, all the way up until around game week 19. So some really, really good numbers. Is the double up worth it? I think potentially yes. Like you said, like the goalkeeper market at the moment does seem very kind of chaotic, really, and goalkeepers are always one of those weird point scoring positions. But if you're not convinced by Gabriel, maybe you're a little bit worried about his minutes, or maybe you want to focus more on defensive contribution defenders, then I think Raya at 5.6 is the easy route in. However, I would only be expecting a 6 or a 2 from him. If Arsenal keep the clean sheet, you're getting a 6. If they don't, it's going to be a 2. They're not a defence that give away too many shots to opposition players, so it is quite difficult to, of course, look at. Gyökeres is going to be one that a lot of people asked me about on my deadline stream and suggested why was I going with him. Again, we're going to have to wait and see how the Newcastle game plays out, but I think he's going to probably benefit in these more easier fixtures. The likes of your West Hams, your Fulhams. I think this is probably where he's going to probably find his feet a little bit more. He doesn't seem like somebody that can really play against defences that sit back and maybe kind of, just completely shut up shop. He does feel a little bit more like a flat track bully. And I've looked at his record at Sporting. I think it was only like 1 goal against Porto and who's the other team? Benfica. Whereas, like, against rubbish opposition, he was bagging, like, 3s, 4s, 2s all across the boards and plenty of goal involvement. And I think we've seen that already from him in the Premier League as well. A goal against Nottingham Forest, 2 against Leeds. I think West Ham could be a good fixture where he, of course, does very, very well. And if he is going to be on penalties, I think, again, he could be a great option. Now, we're yet to see if that's been 100% confirmed. He is the nailed-on penalty taker. However, I do still believe he is going to be it. I think, Saka is a player, and FPL Harry said this on The Wire this week. Saka is a player that will happily give up penalties. He will. Like, we've seen it last season, we've seen it in previous seasons. He will give them to other players. Odegaard, for example, has taken quite a few of them. And I think if a striker has come in and said, I want to be the main penalty taker, I don't think Saka's the kind of guy that's going to get in his way. So I do think somebody like Gyökeres is probably going to be the penalty taker. Now, of course, we've got then those midfield flair picks. We've got Eze, we've got Rice. I haven't included Saka on this list for now. I just want to see what his minutes are like in the Newcastle game before, of course, making a kind of, confirmed decision on he is going to be the pick. But if he looks really, really good, the set pieces share is there, I definitely think he could be a really good asset at 9.8 million. Rice and Eze, though, are 2 players I got a lot of questions about in my deadline stream. So, of course, I wanted to kind of answer those ones. Rice, for me, doesn't really feel like a pick. I think, like I said, there's Xhakas, your Stacks, your Caicedos. These picks just feel a lot better value for money. And I don't think he's hitting defensive contributions, as you can see here, just the 2, that really make him worth the 6.5. Yes, he's got set piece share for a side that love to score from set plays, but I don't think that's going to be enough. If he was chipping away with defensive contributions as well, definitely would be worth a kind of a punt, but not for me personally. Doesn't pick up the defensive contributions enough, so it doesn't really seem like that is a stable avenue for points. Eze as well, I think there's just so many wide players in this Arsenal side that I don't think I would personally go near it. I think with Champions League football, we've already seen his minutes be very dicey. We've seen people like Martinelli and Trossard pick up goals across the season as well. For 7.5, he's no longer that talisman that we saw from Crystal Palace. So again, doesn't feel like an investable player for me right now, unless, of course, he does absolutely smash it out of the park and looks unbelievable. Doesn't really feel like that investable player for me right now. Of course, that potentially could change on the back of that Newcastle game, but for me right now, my key areas would be to, of course, look at either Saka or Gyökeres from the attack, or focus on one of the defenders like Gabriel Saliba, or, of course, if you want to take a punt on the fullbacks, and Raya as well in goal will be a pretty solid option. That is going to complete today's video. Of course, if you did enjoy it, make sure you're liking, commenting and subscribing, and getting any comments that you have about your teams, and the best of luck for game week 7.